Grigory Yefimovich Rasputin entered the world on January 21, 1869, January 9 by the old Julian calendar then in use across the Russian Empire, in the remote Siberian village of Pokrovskoye, nestled along the banks of the Tura River in the Tobolsk Governorate, a rugged expanse of taiga and frozen steppes that seemed worlds away from the opulent courts of St. Petersburg. Born into abject poverty as the only surviving son among a brood of children who perished in infancy or early childhood, Rasputin was the offspring of Yefim Yakovlevich Novik, a sturdy but illiterate peasant farmer, church elder, an occasional government courier who hauled passengers and goods between the distant outposts of Tobolsk and Tyumen on a battered cart, and Anna Vasilievna Parshakova, a resilient woman of similar humble stock whose family had tilled the unforgiving soil for generations. The Novik household was a cramped log izba, its walls blackened by the smoke of a single stove that doubled as hearth and oven, where winters bit with temperatures plunging to 40 below and summers brought swarms of mosquitoes from the nearby marshes. Young Grigory, named after the early Christian theologian Saint Gregory of Nyssa whose feast day coincided with his baptism the following morning, grew up amid the ceaseless rhythm of peasant toil, plowing fields with a wooden ard, herding geese along the river's muddy banks, and scavenging for wild berries and mushrooms in the birch forests that hemmed in the village. Illiteracy was the norm in such isolated hamlets, and Rasputin shared this affliction with his parents, learning instead the oral lore of Siberian folklore, tales of forest spirits, Cossack raids, and the stern Orthodox saints who watched over the faithful from icons crudely painted on birch bark. Pokrovskoye itself was a scattered cluster of some 24 izbas, presided over by a whitewashed wooden church dedicated to the protection of the Mother of God, where the priest doled out sermons laced with warnings against sin, and the local tavern offered watery kvass and gossip as respite from the grind. From an early age, whispers clung to the boy like the river mist. Some villagers swore he possessed an uncanny gift for healing sick livestock, laying hands on ailing cows or horses and murmuring prayers that seemed to coax vitality back into their veins, while others muttered of his wild temper, his penchant for brawling in the dirt streets over a spilled jug of mead, or pilfering apples from the priest's orchard under the cover of twilight. Archival ledgers from the local volist, rural administrative offices, hint at a youth marked by petty scrapes, a 1880s incident of horse thieving gone awry, though never proven, and brushes with the authorities for blasphemy or bearing false witness in village disputes, all of which painted a portrait of a restless soul chafing against the iron bonds of serfdom's lingering shadow, even a decade after its abolition in 1861. By his mid-teens, Rasputin had earned his infamous moniker, not from birth, but from the rough camaraderie of the fields, derived from the Slavic root Rasputny, evoking the dissolute or licentious, a nod to his reputed carousing with the village lads, his roving eye for the daughters of neighboring farms, and a swagger that belied his scrawny frame and unkempt beard just beginning to sprout. Yet beneath this veneer of rural roguery simmered a deeper current, a spiritual hunger that would soon propel him from the muck of Siberia toward the gilded cages of empire. At 17, in the biting cold of February 1887, Rasputin wed Praskovia Fyodorovna Dubrovina, a sturdy girl of 18 from the nearby hamlet of Atkarsk, their union arranged by matchmakers in the time-honored fashion of Siberian peasants to consolidate land holdings and ensure mutual survival against the cruelties of famine and frost. The ceremony unfolded in Pokrovskoye's modest church, with the couple exchanging vows before a crowned icon of the Virgin, rings fashioned from hammered copper, and a feast of rye bread, salted herring, and weak ale shared among kinfolk crammed into the Novik izba. Praskovia, with her broad cheeks and calloused hands from spinning wool and tending geese, proved a steadfast anchor in Rasputin's turbulent life, bearing him 7 children over the years, though only 3, Dmitri in 1895, Maria in 1898, and Varvara in 1900, would survive the perils of infant mortality that claimed so many Siberian babes to diphtheria, cholera, or the simple gnaw of malnutrition. She remained in Pokrovskoye through his long absences, tending the family's meager plot of rye and potatoes, weaving linen on a creaky loom, and whispering prayers for her husband's safe return from whatever pilgrimage or escapade had spirited him away. Their early married years were a fragile idyll shattered by Rasputin's growing restlessness. He toiled sporadically as a carter like his father, ferrying pilgrims to the regional monasteries or hauling timber from the forests, but his nights were given over to the tavern's dim glow, where he matched mugs with Cossacks and traders, spinning yarns of distant lands or debating the soul's salvation with a fervor that bordered on frenzy. Whispers of marital strife echoed through the village, tales of Praskovia's tears after discovering him in the hayloft with a neighbor's wife, or his sudden rages that sent stools flying across the room, but she endured, her devotion unyielding, even as he adopted the surname Rasputin Novik in a bid to shed his peasant past. By the late 1880s, as the first of their children arrived, Rasputin's inner turmoil coalesced into a profound religious awakening, sparked perhaps by a fevered vision during a bout of influenza or a roadside encounter with a wandering starets, a bearded elder whose words pierced his soul like Siberian wind. In 1892, at 23, he made his inaugural pilgrimage to the Abalaksky Znamensky Monastery, some 40 versts north along the Irtysh River, where he knelt before the miracle-working icon of the Sign of the Virgin, confessing sins in a torrent that left the monks agog at his raw passion. This journey was but a prelude. By 1894, after the birth of their first surviving son, he ventured farther to the Cathedral of St. Sophia in Tobolsk, the ancient wooden edifice where Siberian bishops once thundered against heresy, emerging with a fire in his eyes that his neighbors mistook for madness. The true pivot of Rasputin's spiritual odyssey came in the spring of 1897, at the cusp of his 28th year, when a cataclysmic conversion seized him like a thunderbolt from the steppes. Accounts vary. Some say it followed a brawl in a Tumen saloon where a knife fight left him scarred and repentant, others whisper of a divine apparition of the Virgin Mary amid the birches, or the counsel of a theological student named Melity Zaborovsky who passed through Pokrovskoy preaching asceticism, but all agree that Rasputin abruptly forsook the bottle, donned a threadbare pilgrim's robe of coarse homespun, and set forth on foot for the St. Nicholas Monastery at Verkhoturye, a 300-verst trek through wolf-haunted forests and swollen spring torrents. There, in the shadow of the Ural foothills, he encountered Makary, a revered starets whose gaze stripped souls bare. Under his tutelage, Rasputin fasted for weeks, scourged his flesh with knotted cords until blood mingled with sweat, and wrestled demons in ecstatic prayer vigils that echoed through the cloisters. He learned rudimentary letters from borrowed primers, deciphering psalms by candlelight, and imbibed the esoteric lore of the Khlysty sect, a clandestine fellowship of flagellants who believed sin must be exhausted through ritual excess to attain holy purity, their gatherings marked by frenzied dances, self-flagellation, and whispered invocations of the inner light. Though he never formally joined their ranks, investigations by church synods in later years found no irrefutable proof. Rasputin's teachings bore their stamp, that the flesh was a vessel for divine ecstasy, that prolonged debauchery could forge a path to sinlessness, a doctrine he would twist into justifications for his own indulgences. From Verkhoturye, he became a stranik, a holy wanderer unbound by hearth or habit, traversing the empire's vastness on alms and miracles. His itinerary reads like a mystic's atlas. In 1898, to the Ferepontov Monastery in Vologda, where he healed a monk's festering wound with salves of willow bark and prayer. By 1900, perhaps as far as Mount Athos in Greece, the Orthodox Republic of black-robed hesychasts, though records falter here amid the fog of legend. He returned sporadically to Pokrovskoy, his beard now a wild cascade, his eyes burning with visions, to lead clandestine prayer meetings in the root cellar of his father's izba, circles of wide-eyed peasants swaying to his chants, women fainting in rapture as he laid anointed hands upon their brows. Rumors swirled, of ceremonial ablutions where female followers bathed him as Christ was bathed, of strange hymns invoking the King of Passions, drawing the ire of the local priest who denounced him from the Ombo as a false prophet. Yet his charisma swelled. By 1903, Siberian bishops like Christanos of Tobolsk furnished him letters of commendation, praising his gifts of discernment and power over unclean spirits, which he clutched like talismans as he turned his gaze westward, toward the spires of the imperial capital. Rasputin's arrival in St. Petersburg in the winter of 1903, or perhaps early 1904, as frosts gripped the Neva, marked the collision of Siberian shamanism and Romanov refinement, a peasant's hobnailed boots treading the marble corridors of empire. The city, with its canals frozen into glassy mirrors and its palaces aglow with gaslight, was a vortex of spiritual ferment. The aristocracy, sated on French salons and German philosophy, dabbled in theosophy, spiritualism, and mesmerism, summoning spirits via Ouija boards or consulting Siberian shamans for glimpses of the unseen. Rasputin, reeking of wood smoke and unwashed wool, presented himself at the Alexander Nevsky Lavra, the sprawling monastic complex on the city's edge, where he sought audience with Archimandrite Theophan, the silver-haired inspector of the Theological Academy and confessor to luminaries of the court. Theophan, initially wary of this unkempt Stranik with his piercing blue eyes and gravelly Siberian burr, was soon captivated by Rasputin's improvised sermons, passionate exegeses on the Song of Songs or the Temptations of Saint Anthony, delivered with a hypnotic cadence that held the monks spellbound. Granted lodging in the Lavra's guest cells, Rasputin was ushered into the salons of the elite, the velvet-draped drawing rooms of Grand Duchess Elizabeth Fyodorovna, where ladies in Worth gowns sipped Madeira while he expounded on the soul's pilgrimage, or the occult circles of Prince Vladimir Obolensky, who marveled at his prophecies of a coming deluge. Word spread like incense. This was no foreign yogi like the French Philippe Vachon or the Armenian in Kos, but a native son, raw and authentic, his miracles attested by Siberian affidavits. By spring 1904, he had ensnared a coterie of devotees, the Black Princesses, Militsa and Anastasia of Montenegro, sisters-in-law to Grand Dukes Peter and George Nikolaevich, Romanov cousins whose salons buzzed with intrigue. These Montenegrin exotics, with their dark eyes and penchant for mysticism, saw in Rasputin a bulwark against the encroaching secularism that threatened orthodoxy's throne. It was they who orchestrated his entree to the Winter Palace, on November 1, 1905, amid the revolutionary tremors of Bloody Sunday's aftermath. Rasputin was presented to Tsar Nicholas II and Tsarina Alexandra Fyodorovna at the Peterhof Palace, the imperial summer retreat on the Gulf of Finland. Nicholas, the slight, indecisive autocrat with his neatly trimmed beard and hesitant gaze, noted laconically in his diary, November 1. At 2 o'clock came to us a man of God, Grigory, from Tobolsk province. Alexandra, the Hessian princess whose blue eyes masked a steely will forged in the isolation of her German roots, was instantly drawn to his aura of peasant piety, a living relic of the Russia she romanticized from her Lermontov novels. Rasputin knelt, pressing his lips to their hands, and murmured blessings over icons of the Theotokos, his voice a rumble of Siberian thunder. He departed that evening, but the seed was sown. By July 1906, he telegrammed from Pokrovskoye an icon of Saint Simeon of Verkhoturye, the wonder-worker whose shrine had birthed his faith, and returned to the capital at their summons, his star inexorably rising in the imperial firmament. The linchpin of Rasputin's ascent was the frail form of Alexei Nikolaevich, the Tsarevich born in 1904 as the long-awaited male heir to the Romanov dynasty, whose hemophilia, a genetic curse inherited through Alexandra's bloodline from Queen Victoria's brood, cast a pall over the court's every joy. The boy, with his delicate features and cornsilk hair, was the embodiment of dynastic hope, yet his joints swelled with agonizing bleeds at the slightest tumble, his skin a map of bruises that no surgeon's lancet could staunch. European quacks and court physicians, from the Viennese hematologist Dr. Rostovtsev to the English specialist Sir Frederick Treves, flocked to Tsarskoye Selo with elixirs of digitalis and arsenic, only to depart in failure, their leeches and probes exacerbating the child's torment. Enter Rasputin, the unlettered Staryets whose healing first manifested in the autumn of 1906, when a telegram from the Tsarina summoned him to the Alexander Palace during one of Alexei's episodes, an internal hemorrhage that left the 3-year-old writhing in fevered delirium. Rasputin arrived post-haste, his pilgrim staff traded for a borrowed fur coat, and knelt by the cradle in the mauve nursery, his gnarled hands hovering over the boy's brow as he intoned psalms in a guttural chant, eyes rolled heavenward in trance. By dawn, the bleeding had mysteriously stanched, Alexei slept peacefully, his color returning as if by divine fiat. Alexandra, who had spent the night in vigil with her rosary beads twisted to breaking, wept tears of gratitude, hailing Rasputin as a godsend from the saints. Skeptics later posited mundane mechanisms. Perhaps his calming presence reduced the family's hysteria, thereby easing Alexei's psychosomatic stress, or his aversion to aspirin, then a common analgesic unwittingly prized for its blood-thinning properties, spared the child further harm, but to the Tsarina, it was miracle unadulterated, a sign that God had dispatched this holy man to safeguard her baby, the son of her universe. Subsequent cures followed. In 1907, during a bout of gastric distress, Rasputin's prayers coincided with spontaneous remission. By 1912, at the Imperial Hunting Lodge in Spala, Poland, where Alexei's thigh hemorrhage from a bicycle fall left him comatose and the cord in morning black, a desperate wire to Rasputin in Pokrovskoye elicited the reply, "God has seen your tears and heard your prayers. Do not grieve. The little one will not die. Do not let the doctors torment him too much." Against all prognosis, the bleeding halted overnight, the boy rousing to demand his toys, an event that bound Alexandra to Rasputin in chains of fervent devotion. He became a fixture at Tsarskoye Selo, appointed lampadnik, keeper of the sacred lamps before the palace icons, his apartments in the servants' wing a shrine of beeswax tapers and Siberian relics. The Grand Duchesses, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia, adored him as our friend Grigory, clustering around his knees for bedtime tales of forest saints or pressing wildflowers into his pilgrim satchel. Even Nicholas, though more reserved, valued his counsel, wiring him from maneuvers, "Grigory, pray for us." Yet this intimacy bred shadows. In 1910, governess Sofia Tyacheva burst into the nursery to find Rasputin in shirt-sleeves, the girls in their nightgowns, and fired off indignant letters to the Dowager Empress, decrying that filthy vagrant. Nicholas, torn, banished him briefly to Pokrovskoye, but Alexandra's pleas reinstated him, her letters to her husband laced with pleas, "Our friend is essential, without him, how shall we bear it?" As Rasputin's star waxed in the imperial constellation, so did the tempests of scandal that would one day engulf him, for his peasant candor clashed like flint on the polished steel of court etiquette. By 1907, tales from Pokrovskoye had slithered northward, of prayer vigils devolving into khlysty rites, where followers flagellated themselves to bloody ribbons amid chants of ecstatic union with the divine, of Rasputin himself, preaching that carnal sin was the surest ladder to sanctity, his hands wandering freely in the guise of purifying touch. The village priest, Father Pyotr, thundered excommunications from the pulpit, branding him a heretic who lured women with honeyed words and left them shamed. In St. Petersburg, his bacchanals at the Yusupov palaces or the apartments of ballerina Matilde Ksinska, former mistress to Nicholas himself, descended into orgies of vodka and vice. Rasputin, stripped to his long johns, pawing at countesses and cocottes alike, his prophecies slurred through tobacco-stained teeth. A 1909 libel by his erstwhile patron Iliador, the defrocked monk Sergei Trufanov, exposed alleged rapes and seductions, including a lurid account of Rasputin assaulting a nun in a Kazan bathhouse. The Okhrana, the Tsar's secret police, dossiers bulged with affidavits, from Kyania Berlitskaya, a devotee who claimed he forced her into holy passion at knife point, from maids who fled his groping advances. Caricatures flooded the underground press, Zemshchina and Golos Moskvy, depicting him as a leering satyr entwined with Alexandra, her crown askew, or puppeteering ministers from a privy throne. In 1910, another governess, Maria Vishnyakova, accused him of violating her in the palace laundry. A synodal inquiry cleared him, attributing her distress to a Cossack lover, but the damage festered. Rasputin reveled in the notoriety, quipping to scandalized salons, "The Tsarina? Why, I've never even kissed her hand." Yet his letters to Alexandra, ardent missives of "My beloved Sonny, fear not, for God watches over thy tender heart," fueled whispers of an affair, pornographic pamphlets illustrating him deflowering the Grand Duchesses in the Alexander Park. The church turned. Bishop Hermogen of Saratov, once a booster, horsewhipped him in a 1911 confrontation and had him anathematized. Theophan, his early mentor, branded him a pseudo-starets and wolf in sheep's clothing. Even allies like Anna Vyrabova, the Tsarina's plump confidant whose own miraculous recovery from a 1913 train wreck she credited to him, could not stem the tide. Rasputin, undaunted, penned theological tracts in halting script, on the passions and the spiritual life, defending his creed of sin's redemption, but they only deepened the chasm between his rustic fervor and the court's Byzantine intrigues. The Great War's thunder in August 1914 catapulted Rasputin from court curiosity to political colossus, as Russia's Eastern Front became a charnel house of mud, machine guns, and futile bayonet charges against the Kaiser's legions. Initially, he opposed the conflict, prophesying in a July 1914 audience with Nicholas, "The dragon will devour Russia if you unleash the storm," but when war came, he blessed the colors and dispatched amulets to the trenches, lockets of holy soil from Verkhoturye said to repel bullets. As defeats mounted, the Tannenberg annihilation, the Brusilov offensive's Pyrrhic toll, Nicholas, seeking divine favor, assumed personal command of the armies in September 1915, departing Petrograd for Stavka, the imperial headquarters at Mogilev, leaving Alexandra as regent in all but name. With the Tsarina's ear, Rasputin morphed into the empire's shadow puppeteer, his telegrams from the capital: "Dismiss Gormykin, he is a serpent, elevate Gorlov, a lamb of God," swaying cabinet reshuffles like a Siberian gale. Ministers rose and fell at his whim: Alexander Khvostov at Interior, sacked for plotting his demise; Vladimir Kokovtsov at Finance, ousted for fiscal prudence that irked Alexandra's charities. He meddled in diplomacy, urging peace with Germany, Alexandra's homeland, through back channels to the Kaiser, and in military postings, vetoing generals like Alexei Brusilov for dark auras. Bribes flowed, sacks of rubles from industrialists seeking monopolies, jewels from aristocrats craving appointments, even sexual favors from aspiring courtiers dangled like forbidden fruit. The Duma, that fractious assembly of landowners and merchants, seethed. Prime Minister Pyotr Stolypin, the agrarian reformer whose 1906 coup had stabilized the throne, had warned Nicholas in 1911 of Rasputin's fatal influence, dispatching reports of his debaucheries that the Tsar burned unread. Stolypin's 1911 assassination in a Kiev opera house, perhaps by revolutionaries, perhaps with Rasputin's shadowy blessing, removed the last bulwark. By 1916, as bread riots flared in Petrograd's alleys and munitions factories idled for lack of coal, Rasputin's sway encompassed church synods, where he championed hapless bishops, and foreign policy, counseling against the Brusilov offensive's continuation despite its gains. Alexandra's letters to Nicholas brimmed with his counsel: "Our friend says Samarin must go, he is Judas." The public, starved and shell-shocked, vilified him as the "holy devil," pamphlets like "The Antichrist," portraying him as a German spy in monk's robes, his influence the noose tightening around the dynasty's neck. Even within the Romanovs, fissures cracked. Grand Duke Nikolai Nikolaevich, the bearded warrior Tsar demoted from command in 1915 at Rasputin's behest, plotted in whispers. Cousins like Boris Vladimirovich circulated dossiers of his brothel romps. Yet Nicholas, from his railcar at Stavka, deferred: "Let Papa Grigory guide you, my darling, his heart is pure." The unraveling climaxed in the blood-soaked night of December 29, 1916, old-style December 16, a tableau of aristocratic desperation amid the war's winter pall. A cabal of nobles, fearing Rasputin's tentacles would strangle the monarchy into oblivion, coalesced around Prince Felix Yusupov, the effete scion of Russia's richest clan, whose Moika palace on Petrograd's canals hid cellars of torture and treasure. Yusupov, wed to Grand Duchess Irina Alexandrovna, Nicholas's niece, burned with zeal to save Holy Russia. Beside him stood Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich, the Tsar's handsome cousin and aviation enthusiast, Vladimir Purishkevich, the bombastic Duma deputy whose progressive bloc railed against dark forces, and Lieutenant Sergei Sukotin, a cavalryman of iron resolve. Lured by a telegram promising rendezvous with Yusupov's beautiful young wife, a ruse, as Irina was absent, and the allure of a gramophone strains of gypsy ballads, Rasputin arrived at the palace around midnight, swathed in a fur greatcoat against the Neva's chill, his face flushed from a decanter of Madeira already half-drained at a nearby flat. In the basement, disguised as a butterfly-themed den of vice, they plied him with cyanide-laced cakes and wine, potassium cyanide crystals, procured from a pharmacist accomplice, glittering like frost on the pastries. Rasputin devoured them ravenously, discoursing on sin's sanctity, but the poison, diluted by his prodigious thirst or his iron stomach forged on Siberian fare, wrought no visible havoc. He belched, demanded more, and even danced a clumsy kozabai to the strains of Yankee Doodle upstairs, where Yusupov paced in agony, pistol in hand. Retiring to the cellar around 2:30 a.m., Yusupov fired a single shot from his Webley revolver, aimed, per his memoir, at the heart, sending Rasputin crumpling amid the purple drapes. But the Staryets surged up like Lazarus, throttling Yusupov with blood-smeared hands, his eyes blazing with feral light, snarling, "What have you done, dog? You'll pay for this." He staggered into the courtyard, clawing at the snow, only for Purishkevich to loose a fusillade from his Browning, bullets riddling his back and skull, before Sukotin clubbed him senseless with a weighted cane. Bound in a swath of blue silk, weighted with iron bars, they bundled him into Yusupov's Hispano-Suiza and motored to the Bolshoi Petrovsky Bridge, where at 4:45 a.m., amid the creak of ice floes, they heaved his corpse through a hastily chopped hole into the Malaya Nevka's black waters. Autopsy by Professor Dmitry Kosoratov 3 days later, when the body surfaced 200 meters downstream on January 1, revealed a grim mosaic: 3 gunshot wounds, 1 grazing the spine, 1 through the liver, a fatal point-blank to the forehead, plus a saber slash to the temple and contusions from blunt force, but no trace of cyanide, no drowned lungs, and certainly no severed manhood as lurid rumors later claimed. His right eye frozen open in defiance, Rasputin was interred on January 2 in a makeshift chapel at Tsarskoye Selo, erected by Vyrobova on imperial orders, attended solely by the Romanovs in black veils, Alexandra sobbing as she kissed the icon-signed cross from her daughters. Rasputin's legacy, a phantasmagoria of myth and malice, lingers like incense in the ruins of the Romanovs' world, his ghost invoked in ballads from Bony Ms. Disco Dirge to Eisenstein's Celluloid Shadows, a symbol of Tsarism's decadent twilight. In the febrile months after his death, Alexandra clung fiercer to autocracy's corpse, dismissing ministers and ignoring the Duma's pleas, her telegrams to Nicholas a litany of grief: "Our friend is gone, but his light endures." Yet the murder, far from purging the curse, accelerated the throne's tumble. On March 2, 1917, amid bread riots and mutinous garrisons, Nicholas abdicated at Pskov station, the empire fracturing into provisional chaos. The Bolsheviks, seizing power in October, exhumed his remains on Kerensky's orders, lest it become a monarchist shrine, and torched them on a pyre near Petrograd, the flames devouring what remained of the man who had prophesied, in a final scrawled note to Nicholas, "If your kin slays me, my death will seal yours by the people's hand within 2 years." His children scattered, Praskovia perished in Soviet purges, Dmitry toiled in a factory, Maria fled to Paris as a dancer and lion tamer, Varvara to Serbia then America, both peddling sanitized memoirs that painted father as saintly sage. Historians, sifting synodal files and Okhrana archives, debate his essence: charlatan or clairvoyant? Hypnotist whose trance quelled Alexei's bleeds, or opportunist riding the tide of Alexandra's desperation? His influence, exaggerated by foes, nonetheless eroded the dynasty's mystique, fueling revolutionary fires from the Volga to the Vistula. Monuments mock him: a wax effigy in Prague's Sex Museum, a dubious tombstone in St. Petersburg's Volkovo Cemetery, while scholars like Douglas Smith in Rasputin, Faith, Power, and the Twilight of the Romanovs parse the man from the monster, revealing a peasant prophet whose sins mirrored Russia's own. Among the mistakes that precipitated his downfall, Rasputin's unbridled debauchery and refusal to temper his scandals alienated the nobility and church, turning whispers into daggers, his overreach into politics during wartime, meddling in appointments without grasp of strategy, bred incompetence that hastened military collapse and public fury, his blind trust in Alexandra's protection, ignoring warnings from Stolypin and others, isolated him from potential allies, the KHLYSTY-tinged doctrines that justified his excesses invited heresy charges and synodal probes, eroding his spiritual veneer, and his underestimation of aristocratic resolve, taunting foes like Yusupov in salons, invited the fatal conspiracy that no holy man could outwit.